And we are here again on Layman's Term podcast and show, and we have special guest today.
Special guest.
Dustin Buell. Dustin, you got really close to not making the cut for this podcast. You did attend, what's your university? You're wearing your shirt?
I am, yeah. Asbury University.
Yeah, but you did not attend the theological seminary.
That is true.
That's true. If you would have...
Lexington Avenue is a wide divide between Asbury University and Asbury Seminary.
So you narrowly missed being banned from the show.
Yeah, I was going to say, is he still considered a layman?
Yeah, very much so.
Okay, all right.
He's as layman as you and
He's as lame as us. Oh, sorry.
But he did bring with him, for all our podcast listeners that don't take in the full grandeur of the show via the YouTube channel, you miss out on our bobblehead collection that's growing for the show. Dustin brought in his bobbleheads. You care to tell us about your bobbleheads, Dustin?
Sure. You know, I'm kind of a Methodist history nerd, and I have two bobbleheads. These are the only two bobbleheads that I own, but one of them is John Wesley, founder of the Methodist movement, and the other is Francis Asbury, who was one of the first two bishops in what would become the United States when he was originally sent over to be a circuit rider before the Revolutionary War, and then stayed and was later elevated to bishop. So, my favorite Francis Asbury fact is that his face was actually recognized by more people during the American Revolution than George Washington's face was.
Really?
Of course, everybody knew who George Washington was, but in a time where there weren't even pictures in newspapers, many people had only read about George Washington but not met him in person. And because Francis Asbury was continually traveling an entire circuit through all 13 colonies, he had met more of the colonists than George Washington ever did. So more people knew what Francis Asbury looked like during the Revolution than what George Washington looked like.
Wow. I think we could end the show there.
And that's it. Thanks for joining us.
We won't stick around.
Useless facts that no one else needs to know.
Fascinating. So you're saying the quarter was not around during the Revolutionary War?
It was not.
Fascinating.
The quarter wasn't around? How did they pay for things?
I don't understand. Millicents, I do believe.
Millicents.
Little plastic mills.
Well, we are going to talk about confirmation.
Yeah, and that's why we have our man Dustin here.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about the whole kind of concept of confirmation and what does it mean, and we're going to kind of dive into some of that today. So, Dustin, if you had to describe confirmation in one sentence, short sentence, what would it be?
Yeah. Confirmation is the process that the United Methodist Church has set up for our students to be able to explore their faith in a more in-depth setting, and then to make that personal decision to follow Christ and join the church as adult members of the church once the confirmation experience is finished.
Yeah, perfect. So, you kind of get to an age where you can kind of make the decision for yourself to follow Christ, and it's kind of that process of learning a little bit and making that decision. So what age range are we usually talking about there? Yeah,
so in the United Methodist Book of Discipline, the age range for confirmation is left to the discretion of the local pastor at a church.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and so that could essentially range anywhere from like 4th or 5th grade all the way up to seniors in high school. Most churches do that sometime in middle school or junior high. Our church, for the last several years at least, has chosen to do confirmation with our 8th grade students. And so once they reach the 8th grade, we'll invite them to be a part of that process. And then if any older students either moved into our church later or have just started to explore their faith and didn't go through confirmation with their own class, they're also invited to be a part of that process as well. So in this year's class, we actually have one 8th grader, 2 9th graders, and 1 sophomore. So it's a little bit wider variety. But in general, here at First United Methodist Church in Kearney, we invite the 8th grade class to participate in confirmation.
Okay. Wow. I didn't know that. So would there be an age limit?
There is, yes. Once you're out of high school, we would there are different options to go ahead and join the church as an adult member that way.
Okay.
We do tacos con pastor here at our church to
we do.
bring people in that way. But this is for those that are still in high school and younger.
Breakfast tacos on this next round. I'll have
breakfast
to let
tacos.
you know how that goes.
I've heard of breakfast burritos. Breakfast tacos is a new one.
Yeah, is it going to be like a hard shell taco?
Look, I needed to stick with the tacos cone pastor thing, which as we added, right, is tacos with pastors, which I think is a fun play on words because tacos al pastor is a pork with some pineapple, and it's quite delectable. Well, it's my favorite tacos to order at the restaurant, and now I have to really cognitively not.
You've replaced what automatically comes to the top of your
Correct.
mind.
Yeah. So anyway, I just about slept up and ordered some tacos con pastor. But I didn't. I'm sure it will happen.
Will they just stare at you funny, or
Probably.
do you think they'll just figure out what you want?
Yeah, they'll know.
They'll know.
They'll know.
They're like gringo.
This guy. If the Christmas vacation quote, if they know your father, they'll think nothing of it. And I think that thought goes through my mind often. They know me. They'll think nothing of it. They'll just carry on.
So if you want me to dive a little bit deeper into an explanation of confirmation, at our church we begin the first week of November, and we run that program once a week until the Sunday after Easter. So it ends up being about a half-year program, or at least a half-school year program for our students that way. During that time, we explore things from church history to United Methodist theology to personal disciplines to help our faith grow outside of the church building. And so it's a great opportunity to cover a lot of ground, but in a little bit more depth than we're able to do just in our normal Sunday night youth group setting with kids coming in all across the spectrum of faith experience. This gives us a little bit more of an intentional place to dive into those conversations at a deeper level. We take a few trips during confirmation. One of the things that often is true for confirmands as they come in is that they haven't been on a lot of our impact trips before, and so I build in at least one fun experience so that they can learn. Hey, this is cool. This isn't scary. So we do an overnight up to Des Moines for the Winter Jam concert, so that they can kind of see some Christian artists that way. And then we also take a trip to St. Louis for our faith history exploration trip. We begin on Friday night with a Shabbat service at a Jewish synagogue. The next morning we go to Mass at the Cathedral Basilica to start to trace some of those roots of our Christian faith from its Hebrew beginnings into the Catholic Church. We also go visit a Greek Orthodox church. And then on the way home, we stop at the Missouri United Methodist Conference office so that we can talk a little bit about the bishop and the way that church politics and church bureaucracy works that way. And so it ends up being a really, really cool experience for our students to be able to not just talk about church history and draw on a whiteboard, but kind of see and smell and experience what that looks like to have that greater understanding.
Yeah, kind of connecting the dots between some of the, I guess you could say, more ritualistic or liturgical portions of the different churches, and being able to see how it relates. I'd like to apologize for my podcast co-host who didn't mute his phone.
Oh, I did. That's what I was showing you.
No, I know.
You didn't.
I mean, obviously, we heard it.
I know. But
Everybody heard
what's
it.
up with that?
What's
the little red
know.
line?
All I can tell you is that when my Android is muted, it doesn't make any noise. So
Yeah,
Oh,
when
this
my
is fascinating.
iPhone and my watch are muted, they don't make noise. It vibrates a little bit, but that's it. It doesn't go on a full ring.
I don't understand. So I apologize for that, but I am super fascinated that we are able to, I don't even feel like we need to get back on any sort of topic. I'm just so pleasantly pleased to have Dustin here and bring some legitimacy to the show.
Yeah,
if that's what you're looking
some
for
knowledge
from me,
at least.
you're in trouble.
Some like real knowledge.
Real knowledge.
versus assumptions and conjecture on our part.
Your part, mainly.
Definitely on.
The more Dustin talks, the less I have to untalk and backtalk and talk back stuff Keith says.
and remember words.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, Now, when the confirmands, when the people are going through confirmation, then they end confirmation, they enter into membership with the church, right?
Yeah.
So, just get your perspective. I think we have our perspective on it, but to you, what is the membership? What does that mean when you become a member of a church?
Well, one of the things I talk about with our students is that when they join the church at the end of confirmation, if that is the last step they take in their faith with Christ, I have failed as their confirmation teacher. Becoming a church member is not the end goal. It's to help set up a life of continued growth. John Wesley teaches that we can reach a point of Christian perfection, or at least that we should strive towards that. He doesn't mean that we're sinless or that we're never going to sin. He talks about reaching Christian perfection and being perfect in love and the way that we treat others. And so that's a lifelong continuous pursuit. And so when they join the church, there are some practical things that means that they get to vote on any major church decisions. Sure. They can serve on church councils and church boards when we need members that way. We treat them as adult members of the church. And so from that standpoint, it's a great opportunity to get some of our students more involved in leadership capacities than they've been before. But we talk about the confirmation vows that they take as part of confirmation. They're the same vows that any person who's being baptized in the United Methodist Church takes, or takes on behalf of their child if they're baptized as a baby, and the same vows that an adult member takes when they join the church as well. And part of that is we ask them, will you support the ministries of this church with your prayers, your presence, your gifts, your service, and your witness? And so we can dive a lot deeper into any of that, but that means not just showing up on Sunday mornings. That is part of the presence aspect of supporting the church that way, but it's also praying for the other church members, praying for our church leadership, praying for the different ministries that we do within our community. We talk about the gifts that God has given each of our individual members of our congregation, you, me, our students alike, and how they can use those. We've got one of our high school juniors who helps you run slides every Sunday morning, because that's a gift and a passion that he's given. And so we lift up examples like that with our confirmation students to say, what is it that you enjoy? What is it that you're good at? And how can you use that to serve God and serve the church? We talk about some of the various ministries like our Love Haiti or Love KC programs in serving others, and the importance of living out our faith in a tangible way and not just something that we say aloud. And then one of the big ones to me, which is kind of interesting as well, is the witness piece of it. When the United Methodist denomination was formed in 1968, those membership vows were written down, and so they're in our church hymnal. That's what everybody who has joined the Methodist Church has said since that time. But in 2008, our denomination added a fifth part of that vow. Will you support the ministries of this church with your witness? It isn't that any of those first four preclude us from sharing our faith and making new disciples as Jesus calls us to in the Great Commission. But the United Methodist Church wanted to be more intentional about asking us to think about our faith in ways that does make disciples and reaches out to other people beyond the walls of our church. And so ever since 2008, that fifth tenant witness has been a part of what we do. And so that's really fun for me to get our students to start thinking about the intentional ways that they talk about, the intentional ways that they point others towards Christ. I mentioned earlier that we go to do our church history exploration trip in St. Louis. And one of the reasons I like to take our students to the Greek Orthodox churches, if you've ever been in a Greek Orthodox church before, it is an entirely sensory experience. There's the incense burning, so you smell that. But the first thing that the students always notice is that essentially every square inch of the sanctuary is covered with paintings or with stained glass windows, or depending on where the church, which specific church you're visiting, depending on how they've decorated it, could be different media formats. But those are more than just paintings. They call them icons. And the history of that is that they're not necessarily just individual people. It's a scene from the Bible. And that comes from a time when most of the congregation was illiterate. I think oftentimes as Christians we have this almost innate, or at least we've heard from other people, knowledge that we're supposed to read the Bible, but we don't always know what to do with that. But at a time before people could read, it was really important to find ways to translate or to present the gospel in a way that people could understand. And so those very intentionally designed pictures were put up so that as a priest was talking, he could point to different aspects of a story to share that with the people in the congregation. And then that builds on conversations that we have with our students to get them thinking about what tools, what ways am I making my faith accessible to other people, so that if somebody never picks up a Bible to read, how are they going to know who Jesus is? How are they going to know what it means to follow a God that comes to earth as a human and is willing to forgive us? And so we talk about that witness aspect all throughout the confirmation experience.
And that's fascinating that conversation only has been added in 2008, you said?
2008 is when that was added.
Learning new things
It
all
isn't-
the time.
It isn't that we weren't supposed to make disciples before.
Correct.
That's baked right in there. But the emphasis on
explicitly.
on that,
Yeah.
it was added in 2008. So
Mind blown. I mean,
Man, I think he should be a permanent fixture on the show.
he can correct us when I'm wrong.
Oh, I was just thinking he'd have my spot.
you guys do a great job. You don't need me messing that up from week to week.
Yeah, so I want to backtrack a little bit, and so along the lines of membership, I think it's kind of a general consensus between us that really, and we talked about this, I think a little bit from our series of From To, right, where you're talking about the becoming a member of a church isn't about necessarily what you get out of the process, right? It's about what you're willing to give. Mm-hmm. And you're really making that decision to go from somebody that's maybe taking or consuming
Consuming to contributing.
To contributing, right? And so the membership, a lot of people get that, kind of mixed up, and membership's about, I get this and I get that, or, whatever. But it's really about you making a commitment to give these things, your prayers, presence, gifts, service, and witness, to the church and externally, right? So I think that's a really big point to kind of call out. Now, the witness portion, I think, is fascinating, and you kind of talk about it a little bit. But normally, when you hear the word witness, right, you think of somebody standing on a corner with a sign saying, repent, kind of witnessing, right, or out preaching, on the streets or something like that. But it's a little bit deeper.
I think of personal. More interpersonal relationship communication. I think of it as more your willingness to personally stand behind your faith, and then to share it, and maybe even as simple as not being ashamed of your faith. And I think when we're talking students, that's even just owning. Their Christian faith and not brushing it aside, but saying, I go to church. Oh yeah, I go to the church over there. Yeah, every Sunday. Even sharing that with other kids who don't can be a big step. It's hard.
Absolutely.
Keeping all the names out of it. But I was walking along. I haven't told you this story yet. I'm walking along between two baseball fields earlier. Last week, and there's a team warming up, and another kid walking along, and one of the kids on the field warming up said, hey, and waved real big, to the kid on a different team that was walking along. He was like, hey, and waved back, and then the kid warming up that initiated the conversation, he's playing catch, and I hear him hear what the other guy's playing catch with him, his teammate says, who was that? And he said, a kid from Bible study. And the other kid playing catch said, Bible study? Since when do you go to Bible study? Right? Like that was the...
Yep. It was an open for conversation.
Right? It was an open for conversation, but just the sharpness with which the other student, and I was really proud of that. I'm walking away, it wasn't like I lingered to hear the full conversation, but, Bible study. Since when do you go to Bible study? Right? Like that's a hard conversation to navigate at 12 years old.
Absolutely.
And he said, like I said, I picked it up, just bits and pieces of it walking away. He's like, oh yeah, for a while it's cool. Like, he just, but even to own that, he could either move my parents make me or right.
Yep.
But
Yep.
anyway, fascinating little tidbits that you pick up from folks. But I think that right there is a very real sharing of witness.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, I would say it goes beyond words too, right? Like sometimes it's just your actions. You just being, I don't want to say a good person, but just in your actions, right? And really trying to do the right things in all situations. And then, having that conversation that pops up of like, hey, why do you do this? Why are you like this? Right. And then being able to have that conversation in the moment. Right. I think that's also tough to do as a kid or youth. Because you got friends and people trying to steer you to do things you probably shouldn't do that we all probably did as kids.
Or even like in the corporate world or something, like coming out of a meeting and you're, like, hey man, why didn't you just, drop a truth bomb and just, light that up in there? You had that wasn't the responsible thing to do, or that wasn't the Christian, like to say. That wouldn't have been very Christian of me.
Yep. Witness is one of those terms that sometimes carries different connotations for us in the church than it does to people outside of the church too. And it's always fun for me to be reminded that our students are looking at things differently than we are. When we first brought that up in confirmation class, I asked them what they thought our church meant when we talked about witness, and immediately TV shows come up, NCIS or SVU or something like that, and they're thinking, the witnesses that get called in for something like that. And one of our students said something to the effect of, well, a witness is somebody that sees something, so I guess we're supposed to share what we've seen. And I love that definition. I think that an important question for us to think about as Christians when we talk about our witness is, what difference has Jesus made in my life? Why are things that I do different because of my faith? And that view of our own lives then shapes the witness that we share with other people. How has my life changed because of my faith in Christ? And that intentional stepping back or stepping outside of ourselves to look at that is a great opportunity then to share with people on why we react in a boardroom, or why we talk about our faith on the baseball field or something like that.
So good.
Oh, you're fine. So, talking about, again, and diving into a little bit more of, the confirmation and membership and taking the vows and prayers, presence, gifts, service, and witness. We kind of talked about the service portion of it and the gifts portion of it. And I think the gifts is actually, other than probably the witnessing, gifts is probably the hardest thing for a lot of people, because it's finding what your gift is, right? And so a lot of people may try this or try that, or think that, oh, hey, I've got to become a pastor, right? To spread the word of Jesus, right? But you don't necessarily have to do that, right? You can figure out what your gifts are and use those in a way, right? Mm-hmm. So do you guys spend a lot of time with the kids on that?
I wouldn't say we spend tons of time, but we do make sure that is something that's covered in depth. I think, I won't speak for anybody else, but sometimes I tend to over-spiritualize this idea of gifts of the Spirit. There are different lists that we could look at in the New Testament that the Apostle Paul gives, and those are important gifts. I don't want to discount that. But one of the things that I mentioned to our students is that oftentimes the gifts that we have are passions or skills that are innate within us, that God has given us, and things that we enjoy, things that we're good at, things that we could just spend hours doing without realizing how much time has gone by. I give the students an example of somebody from a previous church that was a wonderful cook and just had this passion for making great meals, and realized that was a gift that she had that could be shared with other people. And so she started a kind of series of classes to help teach people how to cook nutritious and healthy meals with rice and beans, and how to put together family portioned meals on a budget that way. So this gift of cooking that she had, this passion that God had born within her was a tool that she could then use to share her faith with other people in amazing ways. That's not to discount, some of the more spiritual gifts, but sometimes I think it's important for me for our students to realize that gifts aren't just churchy things. It's things that they're already doing that they're good at that then they may put through a different lens and look at that as a way to share their faith with other people.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think what you're opening up for a lot of these students too, and a lot of listeners, and other folks within the congregation, when you preach, Dustin, is this concept of, our Christianity compared to Christ. Aren't we all infantile in our developing Christ-likeness?
Yep.
So we all have these. We can all take something away from every lesson, whether we're watching a new baptism and being reminded of vows we took and made in our baptism, or participating in a confirmation service and being inspired by the growth and development these students are making in that right direction. And I think it's important for us to note that every time we participate in or witness a confirmation of students, we can take it on ourselves to make more steps in our own faith development to keep that growth mindset and moving forward. So.
Yep. To echo that back and to build upon that a little bit, as part of our membership vows with the church, oftentimes we think of the people that are joining the church as the ones standing up front professing their faith in Christ, and that certainly is part of it. But I love that within the United Methodist Church, part of the membership vows are the congregation responding back to those people that are joining, saying, hey, we too are remembering what we have committed to. We too, on this day, are committing to help continue to support and help you as you grow just the same way that I help you in reciprocity there. And so I love that it's a two-part thing, that isn't just the person standing up front, but it's the entire congregation.
And I love it too. I have a hard time navigating some of this stuff with our historical Methodist roots and the history of things and how it's all gone along, because I not fully understand like Dustin does. No, take that back. I have a general idea and concept. Is that better? I have a general idea and concept of the history and where it came from, and the circuit riding and the small rural churches and how all that works, so that I recognize whenever you had, maybe you had someone, small rural church, 3 families, 15 people, and someone new homesteading in the area, and then comes and joins that little circle, that class meeting that's getting together every 3, and then at once a month the circuit rider shows up, and then that person's learned and understood through the teachers and leaders there in the group, and then they take a vow of membership and become a member, and then everyone else in the room, the other 15 people, have already done that. They're already members, right? And then when you scale that up to a service like we have here with couple hundred people in attendance, often we will welcome folks into membership and ask a congregational response, of which there could be first-time attendees, first-time guests just rolling up in there as the congregation. So I appreciate the history, and then sometimes find myself wondering how to navigate those interesting situations created by where the church is now in 2023.
In everything that we do as a church, we have to have a multifaceted focus, in that we're helping people who are already within the church grow and develop in their faith, but also providing that opportunity for those that are brand new to onboard and to be a part of that, and not feel like they're an outsider because they don't know the right language, or they don't know
providing context. I'm always wondering about which, Dustin, you help with, because I think context is one of your top strengths, isn't it? It's up there somewhere.
It is, yeah. It is in the top 5. So
it's a struggle for me to be intentional about all the time, but you're pretty on top of it.
That's why I know random facts about Francis
Got to have
Asbury and that
has
kind
to
of
have the context.
One of the things I wanted to mention as part of that, in talking about the congregation supporting those that are joining the church for the first time, it's one thing just to say that, but if there's not relationships that are already there to a degree and continuing to be built afterwards, that's not going to happen. So one of the other things I have our confirmation students do, in addition to being in the confirmation class, they, during confirmation, have to be involved in some other small group within our church. Maybe that's our impact programming on Sunday nights with their peers. Maybe that's one of our adult small groups. Maybe that's some kind of service group that they've not been a part of before. But it's in those places that those relationships are built so that our confirmands and our adult members can support each other because there's actually interaction. And my hope is then that those relationships continue after the confirmation experience is over, that they've gotten plugged in different aspects of our church's ministry, so that will continue after they join the church as well.
Well, awesome. Hey, the sands of time are running out on us.
Just a little bit
Just
left.
a little bit. Oh, there and gone.
gone.
So, want to thank Dustin for being here with us
Yeah, thanks,
and intellectually showing us up, and also
It'll never be the
sorry
same
if that
after this.
happened. That was not my
it'll
goal.
never be the same. And thanks, Keith, for driving the conversation and queuing up Dustin with for him to do knowledge drops on us. And hopefully everyone had the opportunity to learn more about some of our Methodist roots and the roots of confirmation, and some of the stuff our students have learned. So if you got students coming along, they can look forward to opportunity to join confirmation in the future.
Yeah.
Yep. Our sixth grade through seniors meet every Sunday night from 4:30 to 6 here at the church for our regular Impact Youth gatherings, and you're always welcome.
They have a great time. I've taken them up on the invitation.
All right.
I enjoy it.
Sounds good.
Have a good one.
Later.
Deuces.
Adios.